The palace of Sheikh Rafiq glittered that evening with lights strung across marble, arches, fountains bursting into the air, and music drifting through golden halls. His wife, the glamorous and sharp-tongued Samira, was hosting yet another of her infamous high society banquets. Every minister, tycoon, and foreign guest had been invited, not for the food, but to witness her show of wealth and dominance. Samira thrived on spectacle. Her gowns sparkled with diamonds, her heels clicked like thunder across the marble, and her laughter carried sharp enough to cut pride in half. But behind that laughter was something more dangerous: cruelty. Earlier that day, as maids rushed to polish silver and guards rehearsed their positions, Samira had whispered to her circle of friends with a smirk, "Tonight, I will invite her, the maid, the one who scrubs the palace floors. Let's see if she dares to walk among queens." Her friends laughed, their jeweled bracelets chiming. To them, the idea was ridiculous. A cleaning woman sitting at the sheikh's banquet? It would be the joke of the year. A gold-embossed card was handed to the unsuspecting maid, Amara. She was young, dark-skinned, with tired hands, but eyes that carried a quiet fire. When she received the invitation, confusion rippled across her face. "Me? At the banquet?" The butler chuckled bitterly. "Perhaps they wish to amuse themselves, child. Do not take it to heart." But Amara held the card in her hand, her back straightening slowly. A decision settled in her heart. She would go, not as a mockery, not as their entertainment, but as herself. And so, while the guests of wealth and arrogance arrived in shimmering gowns and imported silks, whispers began to spread. "Did you hear? The maid is coming tonight. She will be humiliated. She will be thrown out before dessert." What none of them knew was that Amara would not walk into that hall as a servant. She would walk in like a queen. The banquet hall shimmered like a jewel box that night. Chandeliers of crystal rained down golden light, the air thick with perfumes imported from Damascus and Paris. Tables were dressed in silk, dripping with gold cutlery and dishes stacked high with roasted lamb, saffron rice, and trays of sugared dates. Sheikh Rafiq sat at the head of the hall, his presence commanding though he said little. He was a man who carried wealth like armor, but tonight, even he could sense the restless energy of the crowd. Samira, his wife, floated across the room like a peacock displaying her feathers. She wore a gown of emerald velvet that shimmered with sequins, her hair pinned with diamonds. With every step, she turned heads. With every word, she cut hearts. Her circle of socialites giggled around her, sipping jeweled goblets of spiced sherbet. "Can you imagine?" One of them laughed, fanning herself. "A maid among us," another sneered. "She will trip before she even reaches the carpet." Samira smirked, lifting her chin. "Let her come. It will be the highlight of the night." Even the younger guests picked up on the tone. Some smirked at the thought of scandal, others whispered eagerly, waiting for entertainment. For them, the arrival of a poor cleaning lady in this glittering world was nothing more than sport. The orchestra swelled, violins rising like anticipation itself. Servants bowed and drifted among the tables, refilling cups, whispering updates into Samira's ear. "She is on her way, madam," one butler murmured. Samira's smile widened. She tapped her jeweled fingers against the table, her voice purring with cruelty. "Perfect. Let us prepare a welcome she will never forget." The guests laughed, raising their glasses, but Sheikh Rafiq, seated quietly at the head of the table, furrowed his brows. He had heard little of this plan, and though he rarely challenged his wife's indulgences, something in his chest stirred uneasily. The double doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. Heads swiveled, whispers turned into gasps. The maid had arrived, and from the very first step she took inside, it was clear this night would not go as Samira had planned. The massive doors opened with a groan, and for a heartbeat the hall fell into silence. Every jeweled head turned, every whisper cut short, as Amara stepped inside. But she did not look like the maid who scrubbed floors in plain cotton. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, simple yet flowing with grace. The kind that shimmered softly instead of screaming for attention. Around her neck, instead of gaudy diamonds, hung a single silver pendant, worn, but polished until it glowed. Her hair, usually tied back under a scarf, cascaded in braids, neat and elegant. Her steps were slow, deliberate, her chin lifted, not arrogantly, but with quiet dignity. The guests froze. Some stared, wide-eyed, goblets pausing mid-air. Others exchanged looks of disbelief. "Is that the maid?" one whispered. "She looks different. No, impossible. She looks like a queen." Even Samira, perched at her table with her flock of glittering friends, faltered. Her smirk wavered for the briefest second before she masked it with a scoff. She clapped her hands dramatically. "Well, well, look who decided to join us." Her words dripped with mockery, but they no longer landed the way she intended. Too many eyes were locked on Amara, admiring rather than laughing. Amara did not flinch. She walked the length of the red carpet laid across the marble floor, her soft slippers barely making a sound. She reached the table where nobles and tycoons sat, each one shrinking slightly under her calm gaze. When she bowed respectfully toward Sheikh Rafiq, the hall collectively held its breath. The sheikh, who had been watching closely, felt something stir deep within him. This was no act of rebellion, no foolish display. The woman before him carried herself with a grace even his peers lacked, and in that instant, he saw it too. She did not look like a maid at all. She looked like royalty. The room buzzed with uneasy whispers. Laughter had vanished, replaced with awe. Samira's fingers tightened around her goblet. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Tell me, maid." She spat the word like poison. "Who dressed you? Who gave you the audacity to walk in here like this?" Amara lifted her chin, her voice calm but unshakable. "No one gave me permission, madam. Respect is not borrowed. Dignity is not begged. They are carried within." The words rippled through the room like a thunderclap. And for the first time that night, it was not Samira, but the maid, who owned the hall. Samira's jeweled nails tapped furiously against her goblet. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, sensing her anger boiling beneath her painted smile. The very guests who should have been laughing with her were now whispering in awe of a maid. Unacceptable. She stood suddenly, her gown sweeping like a wave of emerald velvet. All eyes turned to her, but she wore her fury as if it were confidence. "Since you speak of dignity so boldly," she said, her voice echoing across the hall, "why not show us more than words? Words are cheap. Let us see if you can carry yourself as more than a cleaner of floors." Her circle of socialites giggled nervously, egging her on. Samira raised her hand, signaling to the orchestra. The music paused, violins stilling mid-note. With a dramatic flick of her wrist, she declared, "Dance!" A ripple of gasps spread through the guests. "Dance here, in front of everyone," Samira continued, her tone sharp with cruelty. "Since you have entered our world, maid, let us see if you can move like one of us. Or will you trip, stumble, and remind everyone where you truly belong?" Her friends laughed, relieved by the humiliation they thought was about to unfold. Some guests, however, shifted uneasily. A few glanced at Sheikh Rafiq, but he remained still, his face unreadable, eyes fixed on Amara. The orchestra waited, bowstrings trembling against instruments, looking between Samira and the maid. Amara did not flinch. She placed her hands together, bowing slightly in respect toward the musicians. Then she looked directly at Samira, her eyes calm, her voice steady. "If it is dignity you wish to test, then let the music play. For dignity does not stumble, madam, not even when the world tries to trip it." Her words cut sharper than any blade. The crowd erupted in hushed murmurs, anticipation surging through the hall. Samira smirked coldly, waving her hand. "Play!" The violins rose. The drums followed, the rhythm filling the air like fire. And Amara stepped forward into the center of the hall. The first notes of the violins trembled in the air, hesitant, as if even the musicians weren't sure what was about to unfold. Guests leaned forward, fanning themselves, whispering with smirks ready to explode into laughter. But Amara did not stumble. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the rhythm wash over her. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, she moved. Her feet glided across the marble, light yet firm, her body flowing like water. Every step, every turn carried precision, not the clumsy flailing they expected from a maid, but the elegance of someone who knew the language of music in her very bones. The whispers in the hall died one by one. The violins soared higher, and Amara spun lightly, her gown rippling like midnight waves under the chandeliers. The silver pendant at her neck caught the golden light, flashing with every movement. Her arms extended with poise, her eyes lifted as if she were not dancing for them, but for something far greater. The nobles sat frozen. The ministers forgot their goblets. Even the servants, standing against the walls, leaned forward with tears in their eyes. A guest whispered hoarsely, "She dances like royalty." Another muttered, almost in disbelief, "No, more than royalty, like a queen." Samira's smirk faltered. She clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms as she watched the crowd. His awe shift away from her, and toward the very woman she sought to humiliate. The orchestra, swept by the fire in Amara's steps, played with passion they hadn't summoned in years. The rhythm grew, the hall vibrating with life. And then, silence. Amara stilled in the center, her arms crossed gently over her chest, her head bowed. No jewel, no crown, no throne. Yet in that silence, she stood taller than anyone in the hall. A breathless pause hung in the air, and then the hall erupted. Applause thundered against the marble walls. Guests rose to their feet, some clapping wildly, others pounding the tables in disbelief. A roar of admiration shook the banquet. The maid had not only danced, she had conquered. The thunder of applause rolled through the banquet hall, but one figure remained unmoving at the head table, Sheikh Rafiq. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath, all eyes flickering between the arabbillionaire and the black maid who had just silenced his empire of guests. Samira leaned closer to him, her lips twitching with desperation. "Father, stop this nonsense. She's just a cleaning woman." But her words were cut short when the sheikh rose. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed back his gilded chair, the scrape echoing louder than the orchestra had. The hall fell into silence once again. Even the applause died, swallowed by tension. Sheikh Rafiq descended the marble steps, his golden robes sweeping behind him like a river of wealth. His eyes never left Amara, not with disdain, not with curiosity, but with something deeper. When he reached her, the guests craned their necks, whispering furiously. A powerful man like him had never, in years of grandeur, acknowledged a servant at his banquets. He stopped before her and looked around the hall, his gaze cutting through the murmurs like a blade. Tonight, his voice rang, strong and resonant. "You have all witnessed something money cannot buy, grace that no jewels can mimic, dignity that no throne can grant." He turned back to Amara. "Tell me, child, who taught you to dance like this?" Amara, still breathless from the performance, lifted her chin. Her voice was steady, unbroken. "Life, Sheikh. Life taught me. Every hardship, every insult, every burden. It became music, and tonight I simply moved to it." A hush fell. Sheikh Rafiq's lips curved into something rare, a smile, warm and unguarded. He raised his hands and clapped once, slowly, deliberately. The gesture was heavy with authority. The entire hall, nobles and ministers alike, followed his lead. Applause roared again, but this time with reverence. Samira's face drained of color. The joke she thought would ruin the maid had turned into a coronation. Sheikh Rafiq lifted Amara's hand before the crowd. "Remember this moment," he declared, "for greatness does not wear crowns. It lives in those who dare to rise, no matter where they come from." The hall erupted once more, but this time it was not laughter, it was awe. And in that instant, Amara was no longer seen as a maid. She was seen as something far greater. The hall still thundered with applause, but Samira sat frozen at the head table, her jeweled fingers clutching the goblet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every cheer stabbed her pride deeper. Every admiring glance toward Amara felt like fire against her skin. Finally, she slammed the goblet down, the sharp clang slicing through the noise. The applause faltered. Eyes shifted, whispers spread. Samira rose, her silken gown sweeping dramatically as she descended the stairs, toward her father and the maid who stood like a queen without a crown. "So this is what it has come to," she spat, her voice sharp, trembling with fury. "My father, the great Sheikh Rafiq, choosing to honor a servant, a nobody, above his own blood?" Gasps rippled through the hall. No one dared speak to the sheikh that way. She whirled toward Amara, her eyes blazing. "You," she hissed, "don't think this little dance makes you special. You are still a cleaning woman, nothing more, and I will not let you humiliate my family by parading as if you belong here." Amara didn't flinch. Her calm in the storm only fueled Samira's rage. Sheikh Rafiq stepped forward, his voice firm. "Enough, Samira," but his daughter snapped her head toward him, defiance burning. "No, father. You may be blinded by her little show, but I am not. She is a fraud, and I will prove it." She turned to the guests, her voice rising. "If this maid truly thinks herself worthy, then let her face me, here, now, before everyone." The crowd erupted into whispers, hungry for drama. Some looked at Amara with pity, others with excitement. Samira's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You danced your way into their applause, girl. Now let's see if you can survive the fire." The hall waited in tense silence. All eyes turned to Amara. Would she back down? Would she refuse? Amara simply met Samira's gaze, her posture straight, her face unshaken, and with quiet dignity, she said only one word: "Very well." The hall buzzed like a hive, the nobles murmuring with feverish excitement. Samira, drunk on her own rage, raised her chin high and snapped her jeweled fingers. "Bring the fire bowls," she ordered. Servants froze, hesitant. Fire bowls were only used during sacred rituals, when dancers would prove their worth by performing near open flames, a test that demanded flawless control. One wrong move, and the flames would devour their silk, their skin. Gasps swept through the crowd. "She wouldn't dare," one noble whispered. But Samira smirked. "If this maid truly believes she has grace, let her dance with fire. Let her prove to us all that her so-called dignity isn't just a trick of pity." Two servants reluctantly carried out great bronze bowls, each one lit with crackling flames. They placed them in a circle at the center of the marble floor. The firelight flickered across the hall, throwing shadows on gilded walls. The guests leaned forward, their eyes wide, torn between horror and thrill. Amara stepped forward, her gaze calm but sharp, scanning the flames as if she had been here before. Samira's smirk widened, mistaking that silence for fear. "What's the matter?" Samira taunted. "Too dangerous for a cleaning woman? Then bow now, admit your place, and I will spare you the humiliation." But Amara lifted her head, her voice, soft yet unyielding, carried across the silent hall. "I have walked through fire my whole life. Do you think this will burn me now?" The hall went silent. A ripple of awe moved through the crowd. Even Sheikh Rafiq's eyes narrowed, his hands tightening on the staff he carried. He wanted to stop it. Yet something in Amara's stance, in the iron of her voice, kept him rooted. Amara stepped gracefully into the circle of flames. The fire hissed and cracked, throwing light across her dark skin and the silver pendant at her throat. The orchestra, unsure, hesitated, until Amara turned to them and said calmly, "Play," and the violins began again. Samira's cruel smile faltered, because the maid, the so-called nobody, had just accepted her challenge without a tremor. The first notes from the violins trembled into the air, hesitant, almost fearful of the test they were about to witness. The fire crackled louder, licking the bronze bowls, casting a fierce orange glow across the marble floor. Amara closed her eyes for a heartbeat, breathing in deeply, letting the music and the fire merge into one. Then, she moved. Her first step was slow, deliberate. The hem of her gown swirled dangerously close to the flames, and the crowd gasped. But she pivoted gracefully, the firelight catching her silver pendant, flashing like a star in the night. She turned, leapt, and spun with flawless precision, her body weaving between the bowls as though the flames themselves bowed before her. Every step seemed to tell a story, of suffering, of resilience, of dignity no fire could consume. The guests, who had come expecting humiliation, now sat entranced. Nobles clutched their pearls, ministers leaned forward, and even the servants at the walls forgot to breathe. Samira's smirk faltered. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as the hall erupted into awed whispers. "She's not afraid," someone whispered. "She moves like the fire obeys her." Another gasped. The orchestra, swept into her rhythm, played faster, stronger, as though they too were captured by her spirit. The flames reflected in Amara's eyes as she spun through the final sequence, a daring leap that landed her. In the very center of the circle, her arms raised high, the fire swirling around her like a crown of light. Then, silence. She stood tall, unburned, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with quiet triumph. For a moment no one dared move. The silence was so deep it felt eternal. And then the hall exploded. Applause, louder than before, rattled the very walls. Nobles rose to their feet, clapping wildly, some even shouting praise. She had not just danced, she had defied the flames. Samira, pale and trembling with rage, could only watch as her own challenge became Amara's coronation. The applause thundered through the grand hall, echoing against the marble walls like the roar of a storm. Amara stood tall in the circle of fire, her chest rising and falling, her silver pendant glowing as if it carried the approval of destiny itself. But then, silence. Because Sheikh Rafiq rose, the crowd hushed instantly. Ministers, nobles, servants, all turned to the powerful arabbillionaire, waiting for his word. He descended the stairs slowly, his golden robes trailing, his staff striking against the marble with each step. He walked straight into the circle of fire. Gasps filled the air. No one dared to enter, but the flames bent low, as if even they knew they stood in the presence of something greater. Sheikh Rafiq stopped before Amara, his dark eyes locked on hers. "For years," he said, his voice carrying like thunder, "I have hosted kings, princes, and rulers. I have seen crowns encrusted with jewels and men drunk with pride." He paused, glancing at the crowd, his voice steady and unshakable. "But never have I seen a heart shine brighter than this maid's tonight." Gasps rippled through the hall. She walked into fire, not for riches, not for glory, but for dignity, something many of you here, with all your golden titles, have long forgotten. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, lowering their gazes. Sheikh Rafiq turned, his voice rising. "From this day forth, Amara will never again be called Maid in my house. She will be honored, respected, and remembered as the woman who taught us all what true royalty looks like." He lifted her hand high for all to see. The hall erupted once more. Applause, cheers, even tears. Some nobles bowed their heads. Even servants wept openly, pride swelling in their hearts. But not Samira. She stood frozen, her face pale, her lips trembling. For the first time, her arrogance cracked. The hall no longer looked at her, the sheikh's daughter. They looked only at Amara, the woman who had turned humiliation into triumph. Amara bowed her head slightly, not in weakness, but in humility. For she knew true crowns are not worn on the head, but carried in the heart. And in that moment, she was the queen the world never expected. Pride is fragile. Like glass, it sparkles under the chandelier, but the smallest crack makes it worthless. Samira believed titles, jewelry, and her father's wealth made her untouchable. But what she never understood was that the highest crown sits not on the head, but in the heart. Amara proved something the whole hall needed to see. Dignity cannot be stripped away by insults. Grace cannot be buried by humiliation. And true power is not the ability to command fear, but the strength to inspire respect. Look closely. The nobles had jewels, gold, and silks. Yet none of them could move a soul the way Amara did with nothing but her spirit. She walked into fire, not to prove her worth to others, but to show the world she had never forgotten her own worth. And isn't that the lesson for us all? Life will laugh at you. People will try to push you down, to make you feel small, to remind you of where you came from. But your roots do not define your ceiling. Your trials do not chain your destiny. Like Amara, you can walk through flames and still emerge with your head held high, unburned, undefeated. Because wealth fades, thrones crumble, pride dies, but dignity lives forever,